to the Peace Channel. My name is Mel Lehman. I'm the director of Common Humanity, and Common Humanity seeks to build understanding, respect, and friendship between people in the Middle East and the Muslim world and folks here in the States. And we have two wonderful guests today because that's precisely what they have done. I have heard of Iran for many times. I've been to the Middle East something like 25 times, just long since lost track, but something in that range, 24. But I've never made it to Iran. I very much hope to be there. So our guests have much to tell us. And let me end my introduction by simply pointing out the studio I'm in. Back here behind me is an Amish Mennonite quilt from my American heritage. And here is art from the Middle East. And we're gonna see some art and beautiful culture today from our guests. Common Humanity seeks to bring these two worlds together, parts of my world visually, and we're going to be doing that today. So welcome, Dr. Wallace Shellenberger and Mrs. Evelyn Shellenberger. Good to have you with us. You are both medical retired personnel, and we're eager to see pictures and hear about your time in Iran. But first, why don't we, before we go to the pictures, let's get a little bit more about how you got there. What an unusual trip. You spent 4 years in Iran.
Yes, in 2001, we quit working in the medical field and became students again, students with the Mennonite Central Committee in a student exchange program with Iran. So we studied there in Iran for about 3 years. At the same time, there were two families from Iran who studied in Toronto as part of making the exchange. We studied at an institute in Qom, the city of Qom, on the edge of the desert. And one of our first classes was a class on the Quran. We read the Quran through with one of our professors. And about the second week, when we went to class, he had this preface to make. He says, Islam has some attractive features to it. And people here will be wondering when you're going to convert to Islam, and they may be asking you. But he said, if you ever feel like converting to Islam, we want you to go home. We want you here as Christians. We want you here so we can live among a Christian and see how they live. So we were welcomed to Iran specifically as Christians. We were also welcomed to Iran just by the general person on the street.
Many times as we were walking in Iran, people would introduce themselves to us and say, welcome to Iran. One incident that really has been transforming for me was an evening when Wally and I stopped by a small fruit stand in Qom. And as I was getting some apples, I handed it to Wally and said, about how much does this weigh? And as I asked him that question, an Iranian woman who was standing beside Willie quickly turned to me and she said, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from the United States. And she said, oh, are you Muslim? And I said, no, and I'm a Christian. She said, well, what's a Christian American doing in Iran? So I began conversing with her and explained why we were there. And she told me she was studying English at the university and was so excited to meet an American. She said, I have never met an American. And we Iranians love the American accent. So we talked a while and then she left to walk home and I crossed the street with Wally to catch a bus that would take us to our apartment. And while I was standing in a group of people waiting to get on the bus, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and I turned to find this same student and she said, I was walking home and she said, I have a question I just have to ask. She said, aren't the Iranians enemies of the Americans? why would you choose to live with your enemies? Well, it was a profound question, and I spent some time talking to her about that and saying that for most Americans, Iranians aren't enemies. So after a bit of conversation, she said, and the other reason I came back is I forgot to welcome you to my country. And she said, I want to welcome you to Iran, and I pray that your goals for being here will be accomplished. And I thanked her for that, and she left, and I waited as the bus pulled up to the curb. And as it pulled up, I realized that I was not going to get on the bus. Wally went to the front of the bus where the men usually sit, and I was in the back with a lot of women who were trying to get on the bus. So I quickly ran to the front of the bus and started knocking on the window to tell Wally that I wouldn't be able to get on the bus. And as I was doing that, somebody grabbed my wrist and pulled me back, and I turned, and here was the same student. She said, come. And she pulled me to the back of the bus where all the women were pushing and shoving to get in. And she said to those women, she said, here is our guest from America. Would you make room for her so she could ride on the bus with her husband? Every woman stepped off those steps and made a path for me to enter into that bus. I went to the front of the bus where an elderly woman was sitting, and she got off her seat and offered me a seat on the front of the bus. Well, I sat down on that seat and began weeping at the hospitality that was shown to me as a stranger in that land, and the profound importance of being welcomed when you're a stranger. And from that moment, I told myself I will return to my own country and be a person of welcome to people from other cultures and countries that come to visit our country. Welcome is so powerful.
Well, that's a wonderful place to see if we can get the screen share to work. Hang on. I'm still polishing this, but it's going to work. Welcome to, sorry, I have gone, we're going back here quickly. Here we are. Welcome to Iran. And here is a quick map of Iran. Any comments just by way of geography, the location of Iran?
Well, actually, you know, Iran is a lot of times linked with the Middle East, but the Iranians don't identify with the Middle East. They identify with Asia.
Very interesting point. Very interesting point. And there's Iraq, where I spent some time, and where much of the early part of the book of Genesis takes place. So here is a wonderful scene of welcome. You might tell us a little bit about this family. There you are in the middle.
Now, this is a family in Tehran. The daughter in this family, who is next to me, is Nasa, whom we met, and she introduced us to her family. We had a nice visit with them.
Always a part of welcome in Iran is tea and fruit. So wherever you go, you take time to sit and have tea and enjoy fruit together.
Exactly. Speaking of which, here's another chance for you with some food and family, and maybe tell us a little bit about these good people.
Well, this is the man that taught us the Quran, that read through the Quran, and this is his family, and we're having a meal with them.
And there's much in the Quran that we share in the Christian Bible. There are stories of Mary and much that's shared in common. Is that not the case?
Yes, and in fact, they emphasize that Jesus is, he is said in the Quran to be the Word of God, and even Muhammad, the prophet, that's not said of him.
Mm-hmm.
The people in Iran highly revere Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary, his mother. Many of the girls are named Maryam out of respect to Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Yeah. And here is the picture from our promo. These are students.
Yes, we've had a lot of opportunities to dialogue with students while we were in Iran. It was a high point. So these are students giving a warm welcome and enjoy the mountains in Iran. Wally has a story about some of our contacts with students.
We met, here's a picture of us having an animated conversation with some young Iranian men in actually a hotel lobby in Shiraz. Evie and I met with students in Kashan, the University of Kashan, and we were invited to share in a class where they were studying Persian poetry. And one of the students made the comment, said, "We've heard that you like Persian poetry. Could you recite a Persian poem for us?" Now, that really caught me off guard because I wasn't prepared for this at all. But I did know one, and I started off, I said, "Asayesh do geti tafsir," and before I said 4 words, every single student in that class began reciting with me. They all knew the poem by heart.
Oh.
The translation of that poem goes, "Be kind to your friends, and with your enemies, be patient."
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of a country whose younger generations has those words on the tip of their tongue, it's quite amazing. And from the University of Kashan, we traveled to the University of Kerman.
At Kerman, we met again with maybe several hundred students who had invited us to come at Christmas time because they wanted to hear how Christians explain the Christmas story. So we entered an auditorium. There were signs all over the campus, and we have a picture of that sign.
Yeah, I think my slides aren't quite here. This is the picture.
Right.
This is a wonderful picture. I think this is great. Yeah, tell us about this.
Yeah, well, this was the picture that we saw posted all over the campus when we arrived of Mary and Jesus. And in Persian, it says that Wally and Evelyn Shellenberger will be coming to speak about Christianity and the story of Jesus. So we had an evening with them, and the first thing they did was show a picture of Mary. They have a film of Mary and the birth of Jesus, which was powerful. And then they invited us to tell the story of Jesus from the Christian perspective, which we did. And the auditorium was full of students. And following our presentation, the big curtain was pulled back, and behind that curtain was a huge Christmas tree and packages to tell us Merry Christmas. And setting they invited us to talk about, why do we use Christmas trees? Is that in the Bible? What about gift giving? Where do we get that? So it was a wonderful opportunity to share the Christmas story with the Iranian students there.
And here's, I'm sorry, my slides aren't quite advancing quite the way I wish.
This is at Christmas, one of our neighbors sent over this bouquet of flowers, and every flower has meaning. One flower represents Mary, the mother of Jesus. Another is a Jesus flower, plus many cards of Mary and Jesus. So we were very, Christmas was a special time to be remembered in Iran.
Right, right. Now, I think we have this is yet another gesture of friendship.
Yes, Evie and I helped lead several learning tours in Iran of people from North America. And here on one of our learning tours is a woman presenting a peace lamp to Dr. Shumali, an Iranian scholar.
So these peace lamps are found all over Iran, bearing witness to the peace that we as Christians respect and also the Iranians.
Right, right. And here I believe we have yet another meal together. Tell us a little bit about this picture.
Well, this picture was taken in the north part of Iran, near the mountains of Iran, at a family's home. And as you can see, most people are sitting comfortably cross-legged, but I'm sitting up on my knees because it hurts my hip to sit very long cross-legged. But,
yeah. And here I believe we have a poem by one of the most famous poets of Iran that I think a good number of us have heard of. His name is Rumi.
mm-hmm.
And there at the bottom, we have a translation. I think you might give us a verse or two in Farsi and then an English translation.
Yeah, actually, Evie will talk about that a little bit later. But there's one thing I want to bring up before we talk about that.
Yes, by all means, yeah.
On one occasion, we met with a leader of one of the Sufi groups in Iran. And we had a warm, engaging conversation with him. And as we left, he extended his hand to shake hands as a way of saying goodbye. And he had this to say. He said, "In the olden days, if you would come to our city, we would extend our hand to you, and in our hand we would have the key to the city to welcome you to the city." He says, "Now I don't have a key in my hand, but I give you the key to my heart. Welcome to Iran." So this reference to the heart keeps coming up wherever we went in Iran. And Evie ran into it related to this poem here. She'll share about that.
Yeah, just another story that has been transforming to us. And it happened to us during the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is the month when Muslims fast from the first sign of light in the morning until the sun goes down. And Wally and I usually joined the Muslims in their fasting, but with a less strict fast than the Muslims. Well, at the end of the fasting day, it's always important for Muslim families to gather together with friends and share a meal together. And we were often invited to share a meal in an Iranian home during the days of Ramadan. We had not been in Iran long when we were invited to a home to share a meal. We did not know the family, they did not know us. We knew very little Farsi at the time, and our host and hostess knew very little English. I was quite anxious and wondering how the evening would go with such a reality. In addition to the language concern, it was a challenge for us to spend much time eating on the floor, and the Ramadan meals were long, sometimes several hours. We needed to change positions often as we ate around the floor on those Persian carpets, trying to relieve the tingling in our legs or the burning pain in our hips. While we were eating, our host noticed that Wally was having a difficult time sitting on the floor, and he kept offering him a chair or a place at the table. Wally refused and said he would prefer to eat on the floor, even though his hip tends to hurt a bit when he does. After the meal, we retired to the living room and found comfort once again on a sofa and chair. As we tried to speak together with broken English, Persian, and body language, we did manage to get to know each other. By the end of the evening, we knew everyone's name and something about them. Our host loved poetry and had written many poems in calligraphy. He showed us some, as he knew we were enjoying the opportunity to learn and read Persian poetry. We talked about the importance of peace between our countries and the barriers that kept us from knowing each other. Our host remarked, "Our governments will never be able to make peace. Peace comes from people like us getting to know one another. It was important for me to realize you have pain in your hip, Wally, when you sit on our carpets. I do too." He got up from his chair and moved to his writing desk in the living room. He sat, took out a sharpened reed, dipped it into ink, and began to write. The room was silent. After some time, he walked over to where we were sitting, carrying in his hands a beautifully written verse from the Persian poet Rumi. As hamdeli, as hamzebani, beter est. Of shared tongue or shared heart is better. We struggled that evening to communicate through our foreign tongues, but felt at ease through our shared hearts. I think it's that picture there, Mel, of the calligraphy.
Right. This is the one here. Mm-hmm.
Right. Uh-huh.
Say it again.
Hamdeli as hamzebani beter est. Of shared heart and shared tongue, shared heart is best.
What wisdom, what wonderful wisdom. I'm sure I've felt that, and I think all of us here have felt that, yeah. And you have written a book, which is right here. Now, behind your picture is the peace lamp, which you gave to folks throughout Iran with a verse from the Quran and the Bible, as if you might tell us that part again. And that's behind you in the picture there, and here it is on the cover of your book.
Yes, the lamp again was a gift, and we included two verses, one from the Quran. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. God's light may be compared to a niche which enshrines a lamp. The lamp is within a crystal of star-like brilliance. And then from our Psalms, God's word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path.
Actually, these lamps were from the Mennonite Central Committee. I think we brought them and gave them, but they came from the Mennonite Central Committee.
Yeah. If folks want to get a copy of your book, if they would like to hear more about your work in Iran, here is your email address, which you said we might share.
Sure.
Shellen for Shellenberger, Shellen38@hotmail.com. And you would be glad to get folks to contact you and talk some more via email about your great experience in Iran.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here is our address for Common Humanity, commonhumanity.org. Let's go back and see what we might do. We're approaching, time has flown. This has been so interesting, but we're already pushing towards our half hour. Is there anything that you would want to say yet that's close to your heart that we didn't mention?
Yes.
The takeaway the takeaway that you still think of all these years later.
Yes. When we were preparing to go to Iran, Ed Martin, who was the director of the program where we were in Iran with MCC, took us to visit the ambassador, Iranian ambassador to the United States. Or was it, maybe it was the United Nations.
Yeah, to the UN.
And he met with us and introduced us to a poem by Sadi. Sadi is he preceded Rumi and Hafez, actually. One of my Iranian friends used to say that Sadi was Rumi's teacher. But anyway, Sadi had this poem. It says, "Bein Adam a'azay yekdigeran ke der aferinesh zeyugeherand." And that poem is engraved above one of the entrances to the United Nations building. And the translation of it is, Human beings are all members of one another, all created from the same precious jewel. And then it goes on to say, during life's crises, when one human being hurts, if another does not feel that pain, he cannot be called human.
Oh, what a wonderful poem.
And we heard that poem. It surfaced several times while we were in Iran.
Yeah. What a wonderful poem. What a wonderful chance to share with you. We have just one other thing we need to mention, which is that at this point, US sanctions, to change topics just a little bit, you've been talking about your own experience there. I wanted to add just one other very, very important point when we're talking about Iran. No discussion of Iran would be complete at this moment without mentioning the dreadful sanctions that the United States has posed on Iran. We here in the States have enough trouble keeping up with news of the world in general over time, over the decades. But at this moment, with everything going on, an election going on, we're having a particularly difficult time following news from the rest of the world and from Iran. And I want to point out, this is a editorial from the New York Times a couple of days ago. And the title is that in pandemic, Iran deserves US mercy. And it talks about how the draconian sanctions are just hurting that country. And here is a sentence, just one sentence. Barbara Slavin, director of the Future of Iran Initiative of the Atlantic Council, calls the American, quote, maximum pressure, unquote, campaign against Iran, quote, sadism, masquerading as foreign policy. What a terrible thing. This is from mainstream American opinion. This is not some fringe group. This is quoted in the New York Times by a mainstream opinion. Well, we must address this. Common humanity and like-minded folk, we're going to try to work on this. Thank you so much, Evelyn and Wally. Personal friends, did I mention that? Friends of my wife, Susan, and I. It's so great to be with you. Common Humanity is back. We have a website, commonhumanity.org. You will see some Christmas presents. Some of these paintings, this painting right here, is one of the posters that you could buy for Christmas. Christmas not that far away. We're selling posters. We are happy for your contributions as well. Takes some money to get high-speed cable. Takes some money for this computer I'm on. Takes money for the Zoom license, so contributions would be most welcome. Thank you, Evelyn and Wally. God bless you. What a fascinating story. We care so much more about the people of Iran through them. And give us that last poem again from Rumi to conclude. I thought it's written over the entrance of the UN, such a wonderful poem. If you might, again, in Farsi and English, just that wonderful sentiment, if you would, Wally.
بین آدم اعضای یکدیگرند که در آفرینش یکدیگرند. It's human beings are members of one another, all created from the same jewel. When over time one member hurts, if you do not feel the pain of the other, how can you be called human?
Thank you so much, Wally and Evie, for helping us to feel the pain and the beauty and the joy of the people of Iran. Such a great community of folks there. Thank you so much for helping us to appreciate the common humanity of the people of Iran. Thank you. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And for our viewers, we're going to post this on our website, hopefully by Monday. Come back in 2 weeks for another program. Best of wishes. Again, thank you, Evie and Wally. So great of you to be with us. I enjoyed this so much.
Thank you for having us.